Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today to this third panel of the Localizing the SDGs in Asia and the Pacific Week. Today, the panel will focus on data management and monitoring for localizing the SDGs. We have more than 340 participants registered for this webinar, and we really look forward to the presentation and the discussion. My name is Stefano Marta, and I am the OECD coordinator of the program on a territorial approach to SDGs. I work in the Cities, Urban Policy and Sustainable Development Division of the OECD. Why this topic, the topic of this week and the topic of this session is particularly important? At the OECD, we believe that this is really important for three main reasons. First, because the SDGs are a shared responsibility across levels of government. At the OECD, we estimate that more than 100 targets will not be achieved without properly engaging local and regional government. We also estimate that almost 40% of public investment comes from cities and regions worldwide. And also because we are seeing more and more that the SDGs can be a tool to improve multi-level governance. And we have many examples in OECD member countries like Japan and Germany that are doing so. Second, we believe that the SDGs can be a tool for policy making for government and also for cities and for regions, going beyond the compliance agenda to strengthen the sustainability dimension of policy and strategy. And third, and this is also why this specific session is so important, we believe that we really need to go granular with data. We need to measure progress beyond national averages. We estimate, and my colleague Paolo will explain this in his presentation, that even in OECD countries, there are strong territorial disparities in achieving the SDGs within country disparities. So national average are not enough to measure the progress. So this is why we need data, we need granular data. As this is the third day of the series of roundtable of the week, I would like, before starting the session and before some logistic information, I would like to give the floor to Christian Louis from the Log to recap the main findings of the first 2 days. Christian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Stefano. Warm welcome and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We started this week with a first session on multi-level governance, policy coherence, and institutional development. And I will just briefly present the findings and results of the first session and the second one. Factors such as increasing urbanization in Asia, frequent natural disasters, and currently COVID-19 pandemic have highlighted the important role of subnational governments and thereby localizing SDGs in Asia and the Pacific. Localizing SDGs requires new thinking, policy coherence and interdependence of sector policies, systems thinking, innovation, multi-stakeholder arrangements, among others. Important to integrate clear decentralization processes, functional assignments, and resources in line with functions. Localizing SDGs is an iterative process from involvement of subnational governments in identifying priorities to developing strategies, their implementation with full ownership of subnational governments. Localization must be an essential part of national SDG strategies. Voluntary subnational and local reviews are an important contribution to voluntary national review process. Political will, strong legal framework, good implementation strategy, and platforms for multi-stakeholder coordination support SDG implementation and localization, even down to village level, for example, in Indonesia. One of the key enablers for localizing SDG is financing. And this is why the second session was dedicated to financing for the SDGs at the subnational level. A significant amount of public spending and investment on key sectors related to the SDGs, such as health, education, social protection, water supply, environment, and climate, are undertaken by subnational governments. Enabling fiscal framework for SDGs financing are not in place in many countries. Fiscal decentralization should be improved to better align responsibilities and resources and provide more fiscal space to subnational governments. Enhanced fiscal decentralization can also help to attract private sector financing. Yesterday, we learned from two examples. One was from Kazakhstan, where the integration of SDGs in national planning and budgeting processes. They showed a robust understanding about SDG-related financing needs and the importance of diversifying funding resources. The second example came from Mongolia, from the Orkhon province, and they showed us that the legal framework for subnational government financing needs to be developed further to accommodate funding of projects from multiple sources, including the private sector. While climate finance is available globally, there is a dearth of mechanisms to channel such funds to the local level. There's a need to strengthen financial architecture, local institutions, and partnerships to unlock the flow of climate finance to local level. An example was the ADB's Community Resilience Partnership Program 2021-2030 launched to support these. Data on SDG as in subnational government finance as provided by the OECD UCLG World Observatory of Subnational Government Finance and Investment are crucial for monitoring and reporting on the localization of SDGs, which takes us to the third panel on data and monitoring today. Back to you, Stefan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian, for this very precise summary. Before going to the first speaker, just a few rules of the house for this webinar. We really would like this to be a very lively webinar with short presentation, opportunities for interaction, and a Q&A session in the end. So I would kindly ask the presenter to follow the allocated presentation time of 10 minutes. So we'll have enough time for discussion. For the participant, we aim to have an open discussion among peers and fellows. So please indicate your name and institution in the Zoom participant list. And finally, for comments and questions, the comments and questions can be raised only in the chat box. So please write your name and the organization when you ask the question. Then we also kindly ask you to be specific which presenter your question is directed to. So it will be easier for us to ask the question to the speaker. And please try to keep the question short and straightforward. Finally, we are recording this webinar. So let's now move to the panel discussion. I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Paolo Veneri, who is the head of Regional Analysis and Statistics at the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Region and City. Paolo will explain the OECD Localized Indicator Framework for the SDGs and the related web tool. Paolo, you have the floor and 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano, and good afternoon, good morning to everybody. I have the pleasure in this session to shortly present the OECD approach to monitoring and measuring SDGs in regions and cities. I will share my screen. So, okay, you should see now the slide. So, first of all, let me also clarify that I work at OECD, as stated by Stefano. Together with Stefano, we work in the same directorate, and we work together in the program called the Territorial Approach to SDGs. A very short summary on the key objectives of the program was there are three main objectives that we could summarize in learn, measure, and share and guide. The idea is that we work together and we focus our analysis and data at a subnational level. Therefore, we work together with subnational governments. We have a list of participating regions and cities at the bottom of this slide. And the idea is that to learn how SDGs are used in policymaking to manage trade-offs, to be, let's say, streamline in strategies, regional development strategies, city strategies, etc., to measure where cities and regions stand for relevant SDGs, also against national average, but also compared to other peers in the same country or in other countries. And also on how to use this approach for having dialogue across pilot regions and cities, etc. So now I go straight to the data part. I will focus, given the nature of the session, on the data part, so the measurement framework. And first of all, I would like to clarify that the idea of the measurement framework was to develop a set of indicators that are comparable across regions and cities in OECD and OECD countries and some selected partner countries with which we cooperated. So the first point was to choose the spatial scale at which we want to have indicators that are comparable. So we have two subnational scales at which we refer our indicators that we use to monitor SDG progress. One scale is the regional level, so we have subnational regions. In this case, we cover 48 countries, so 36 OECD countries plus 12 other countries, and we have about more than 600 regions across these countries covered. And when it comes to cities, we refer to metropolitan areas of at least 250,000 people. And again, here we cover 33 OECD countries plus Colombia. The idea is really to have units of observations that are comparable, to build a data set, a database that is publicly available, and I will show you at the end, in which each cities and regions included can compare itself with other regions and cities. What was the other step that we had to develop was that of identifying the indicators given the SDG framework. In particular, we asked us two main questions. The first was what targets and what indicators are actually relevant at the subnational scale. We have, in fact, let's say, we had to select the indicators that are most important, let's say, to be, let's say, used at the subnational scale rather than at the national wide scale. So there is a distinction between place relevant and place neutral. And then also, given that our scope, geographical scope of the analysis was primarily focused on OECD countries and other let's say, predominantly developed countries. So we also selected the target or prioritized the targets and the indicators that are relevant for the developed world. So we did this, let's say, this double consideration: place relevant and developed countries relevant, and we came out with a number of indicators that we selected to measure at this spatial scale. And what was the result? That, I mean, for all, I mean, we were able to collect or model indicators for all SDGs. Of course, depending on the SDGs, we have a different type of coverage in terms of number of indicators. So around 130 indicators in total we have, with which we monitor progress in 65 out of the 105 targets identified as very relevant for OECD regions and cities. So you can see from this slide that let's say, the percentage of targets, subnational targets that we cover for regions is higher than those for cities, because regions have, let's say, data availability challenges for cities are more hard to be overcome. A few words on the data sources that we had to use to bridge the many data gaps that we had to face. So first of all, we rely on let's say, structured approaches to collect, that the OECD uses to collect data. There are 4 direct relationships with national statistical offices. We have annual questionnaires. Every year we update our databases, including this one on monitoring SDGs, and we collect different indicators through a questionnaire. There are some examples that you can see in the left of this slide. And then we have also, we of course also use other data sources that are that can be very different, from geospatial data sources that are modeled or produced by research institutes, so that are available for research purposes, to global survey data like Gallup, or other types of database with a geospatial component that we can use relatively easily across different countries that we cover. And of course, there are some indicators that are the result of collaborations between the OECD and other international organizations like the International Transport Forum, the European Commission, and others. Just to have an example of the indicator on land consumption relative to population growth. This is an indicator within the SDG 11. It's the growth rate of built-up area minus the growth rate of population. What I want to show here is that we can really cover many countries, many cities. This slide shows the level of this indicator for the city in each country with the higher value, and the city with the lower value, and you also see the national average in the middle. So just to see how heterogeneous is the situation and how different can be each city is from each other, and very easily and very quickly it's possible to monitor all these different indicators this way. I would end my presentation just by mentioning that we have developed an OECD visualization tool that it is for dissemination and for people, subnational governments, and any other interested stakeholder to visualize easily from the web all the data, the indicators that we have put together to monitor SDGs. So the tool provides a comparison of each regions and cities to the country average, and also comparisons with other peer regions of cities of other countries that the user can select and look at. Also, the coverage of this visualization tool is the same coverage of the database. Therefore, let's say all large regions that we call TL2 in OECD countries plus partner countries, and over 600 functional urban areas or metropolitan areas from OECD countries. This is, you see in this slide the URL of the visualization tool. You can just type OECD-local-sdgs.org, and you will land in this web page that you can see. From the web page, you can select one of the two tab regions or cities that you find on the right. And there is a default region, let's say highlighted, that you can just click on go, or you type the name of the region in the white box or the city, and you will land in the profile of the region. You can also select the region or the city directly from the map, and then you will have, let's say, you will visualize this type of visualization in which, let's say, the closer the dots is the position of the region, of the selected region, to achieve, let's say, the sustainable development goal that is each time selected. So the closer you are with the black line at the border of the circle, the closer you are to achieve the objective. And you can have other dots that are in this case orange, which are peer regions that you have selected to be compared to your own region. You can also visualize in the tool SDG by SDG where each region is located. I invite you, if you are interested, to go to the web page and see the presentation. Thank you very much. I think I can stop here.
Thank you, Paolo. Thank you very much for the presentation. We are currently using this indicator framework to measure the progress in all OECD cities and regions, and also in our 11 pilot of the program that Paolo mentioned at the beginning. So let me now turn to the next speaker, to Mr. Stefan Schipper. Stefan is a senior statistician, statistics and data innovation unit in the office of the chief economist and director general at the ADB. Stefan will talk about innovative technologies to support data collection and dissemination for SDG monitoring. Stefan, you have the floor and you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. Distinguished panelists, guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to speak at this session of the Virtual Roundtable series to explore how to localize the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. My name is Stefan Schipper, and I'm a senior statistician in the Statistics and Data Innovation Unit of the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department of the Asian Development Bank. My presentation will focus on innovative technologies to support data collection and dissemination for SDG monitoring. Next slide, please. I will structure my presentation on innovative technologies to support data collection and dissemination for SDG monitoring as follows. First, I will present the key indicators database. Then I will focus on innovative systems to collect and disseminate SDG indicators. And I will conclude with initiatives of the Asian Development Bank Statistics and Data Innovation Unit to support innovative technologies for data collection and dissemination. Next slide, please. The key indicators for Asia and the Pacific, or key indicators, is the annual statistical flagship publication of the Asian Development Bank. Key indicators contains a comprehensive set of social, economic, and environmental statistics, including indicators for the Sustainable Development Goals for the 49 ADB members across Asia and the Pacific, as well as selected indicators on global value chains. The data in key indicators are publicly available in the website of the statistical partners, the 49 regional member economies, as well as in international sources like, for example, the United Nations, the World Bank, or the International Monetary Fund. The 50th edition of Key Indicators was released in September 2019. Since then, the vital data within Key Indicators is accessible in a digitized format within the Key Indicators database, allowing interactivity with the data in a user-friendly manner. Key Indicators continues to be one of the most downloaded knowledge products in the entire ADB catalog. Next slide, please. I would like to present some key features of the Key Indicators database. The Key Indicators database includes a categorized search facility for data, a country view showing key indicators for each country, and providing easy access to country tables containing a comprehensive set of social, economic, and environmental statistics for each regional member economy. It includes data stories for selected SDGs and regional trends, customized data visualization, various download options, including an API to automatically download data and to meet the varying demands of a broad range of users. Next slide, please. So these are the key features which are now popping up, which I just explained. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this is, so the back end of the Key Indicators database is the so-called KI Studio, which enables the extracting of SDG indicators and other statistical indicators from international sources through an application programming interface or an API. The SDG indicators are sourced from the United Nations SDG Global Database and custodian agencies of selected sustainable development goals like the International Labour Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, World Health Organization, UNESCO, and other UN agencies. APIs are not only used to retrieve SDG indicators in the key indicators database, but also users can extract the data in the key indicators database through the key indicators database API. There are three main benefits of sharing data by an application programming interface or API. First, it provides a common standard for reporting and disseminating statistical data by data providers and data users. Second, the data exchange mechanism needs to be set up only once, and then the data can be exchanged automatically from machine to machine. And third, it reduces the burden of data providers at the national, subnational, as well as the international level. The Key Indicators Database API, in other words, enables a centralized machine-to-machine data transmission between ADB and its statistical partners and its data users to provide easy and timely access to information. If you show the chart on the slide as well, an application programming interface or API can be explained in layman terms as a messenger that takes requests, translates, and returns responses. For example, when sitting down to order at a restaurant, a waiter takes the order, relays it to the kitchen, and returns with the food. In this scenario, the waiter acts as the API. Next slide, please. The second innovative system I would like to present to collect and disseminate statistical indicators is Statistics and Metadata Exchange, or SDMX. The purpose of SDMX is to standardize and modernize the mechanisms and processes for the collection, processing, and exchange of statistical data and metadata using a common format. The use of SDMX for data and metadata exchange was also recommended by the United Nations Statistical Commission, the highest statistical decision-making body. SDMX consists of technical standards. SDMX is an ISO standard. SDMX contains statistical guidelines, and SDMX provides a framework for an IT architecture and IT tools to enable the implementation of SDMX at the national, subnational, and international level. The SDMX governance structure has three levels. First, the sponsor committee, second, the SDMX secretariat, and third, the SDMX working groups. The SDMX is an initiative sponsored by 7 international organizations: the Bank for International Settlement, the European Central Bank, Eurostat, the Statistical Office of the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, the OECD, the United Nations, and the World Bank. The SDMX sponsor organizations are represented by the senior management in the SDMX sponsor committee. The SDMX sponsor committee is the ultimate decision-making body. The SDMX secretariat is comprised of senior experts from the sponsoring organization. The secretariat provides executive support to the sponsor committee and is the interface between the sponsors and the working groups. The SDMX technical working groups and statistical working groups report to the SDMX secretariat. They maintain, improve, and further develop the SDMX technical and statistical standards. The work process of SDMX are fully transparent. Public consultations are conducted when major revisions are foreseen. For example, now it's SDMX version 3.0 being implemented soon. I will now present initiatives to support innovation for data collection and dissemination. Can you go to the next slide, please? The Statistics and Data Innovation Unit of ADB is promoting SDMX as a tool for an efficient exchange and sharing of statistical data and metadata in Asia and the Pacific. Currently, 20 ADB developing member economies are already providing key economic indicators in SDMX format using the National Summary Data Page supported by the International Monetary Fund. The National Summary Data Page is a data portal that allows users to access data, view metadata, or browse links to online datasets. For SDG indicators, the National Statistical Office of Cambodia and the Pacific Data Hub of the Secretariat of the Pacific Community are using the .stat suite, a database that supports data exchange in SDMX format. SDG indicators for Cambodia and the Pacific Community are therefore already available in SDMX standard. The Statistics and Data Innovation Unit of ADB is currently supporting the National Statistical Office of Thailand to implement SDMX for the SDGs. The technical assistance under Data for Development Bank is supporting the National Statistical Office of Thailand to use the global SDG data structure definition, but will also support the National Statistical Office of Thailand to create the national data structure definition for subnational SDG indicators and subnational SDG disaggregation that cannot be accommodated in the global SDG database. Moreover, the Statistics and Data Innovation Unit is currently collaborating with ADB's IT department on pioneering the use of an ADB API gateway. The ADB API gateway will centrally host all externally facing APIs of ADB to expose crucial data for policymaking, for external consumption, and to provide the foundation for data exchange and open new channels for integration and partner collaboration. The Statistics and Data Innovation Unit is also partnering with the United Nations. Next slide, please. Statistical Division and the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific and the UN Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific to promote SDMX in the region. Next slide, please. And the collaboration will support a uniform data exchange and dissemination in SDMX format. Another aspect of the partnership is to promote an SDMX-based API. Lastly, we will pioneering an online training course on SDMX that will include an overview of SDMX IT tools and explain the domain of the system of national accounts for SDMX implementation. Next slide, please. The Statistical Data and Innovation Unit of ADB is also supporting more innovative methodologies to ensure SDG data collection. For example, we are supporting the use of computer-assisted personal interviewing, or CAPI, an online training course for CAPI platforms like CS Pro and Survey Solutions has been developed and is now already in its third iteration. SDIU is also supporting several economies in the region on the implementation of CAPI, CATI, or CAVI, for example, Lao PDR and Vietnam on the labor force survey and Sri Lanka for the agricultural household survey. Second, SDIU is supporting the development of statistical business registers. We are currently supporting Cambodia, Lao PDR, and Bhutan for the development of their statistical business registration systems. Third, SDIU is supporting the use of remote sensing on measuring rice production and yield for Lao PDR, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And lastly, SDIU is exploring the use of big data, in particular, the use of satellite images for poverty mapping in Thailand and the Philippines. Next slide, please. Before I end my presentation, I would like to invite you to visit the dedicated website of the Data and Statistics at adb.org to support evidence-based policymaking, sharing knowledge with partners and statistical agencies in the region, and to improve the region's capability to produce efficient statistics. I would like to conclude by thanking you for your commitment to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals through the joint efforts of our developing member economies and the Asian Development Bank. I look forward to an engaging panel discussion and opportunities for the Asian Development Bank to deepen, strengthen its support for the Sustainable Development Goals at this critical juncture for our region. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to you, Stefan, for this very comprehensive presentation. It's interesting to see how you are developing all this innovation system, and also that in some cases you are providing specific support, as you mentioned, to subnational government where data are not included in the national systems. I see that the chat is already quite active, and we will address this question in the Q&A. I see that there is also a question in the I invite you again to post your question in the chat, because this is where we are going to pick the question. Now, after these two presentations by OECD and ADB, we are going to go a bit more in depth into two specific country cases. The first one will be the Philippines, and the next speaker is Celia Reyes. She is the president of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and she will provide an example from the Philippines about using community-based monitoring system for collecting SDG data. So, Celia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. So I'll be presenting the community-based monitoring system as a way of localizing the SDGs. Next slide, please. The SDGs entail ensuring inclusive and sustainable development in the preparation and implementation of plans and budgets. This requires availability and access to more timely and granular data for more informed assessment and decision-making. There's lack of up-to-date and necessary disaggregated data that can be used by policymakers and program implementers for a more comprehensive analysis of development situation and point in time and across time, and to monitor, prepare, and respond to impacts of policies, programs, and shocks such as economic crises, disasters, and the COVID pandemic. Local governments, particularly in decentralized countries, are at the forefront of delivery of basic services and in mainstreaming national governments' development commitments, including the SDGs, among others, in local plans and budgets. To facilitate greater efficiency and accountability in use of resources, existing data and capacity building gaps need to be addressed and strengthened. Next slide, please. Localizing the SDGs in particular requires mechanisms and tools to empower and enable local governments to access, generate, and use necessary data for needs assessment, resource prioritization and optimization, design of appropriate interventions, and monitor impacts over time. It also needs the establishment of a good and regular monitoring system at the local level that can generate a set of multidimensional and community-specific indicators with the required data disaggregation that can be used to report on the progress or achievement of the SDGs, identify gaps, and address the problems. It also demands user-friendly and cost-effective tools and solutions for a more synchronized data collection, data processing, database management, and use of data for more informed and timely decision-making. Next slide, please. So to meet the SDGs through CBMS, we have to remember that the SDG core principle of leaving no one behind requires data disaggregation at the lowest administrative levels. with limitations of the data in terms of granularity, availability, and access generated by existing national statistical systems, and the high cost of conduct of national surveys, the community-based monitoring system can be adopted to generate the necessary data to track subnational level progress in the achievement of the SDGs. Country reports in the SDGs rely mainly on nationally representative sample surveys conducted by the national statistical offices. As such, they cannot provide all the desired disaggregations, such as by ethnic group, location, age, sex, and so forth. CBMS complements the existing national data ecosystem by addressing data gaps for better needs identification, more comprehensive analysis, and design of appropriate programs and interventions. Next slide, please. So how is that done? CBMS provides the necessary disaggregated data to know the status of and disparities among communities, households, populations in meeting the SDGs. Also to identify and assess needs and prioritize program action. CBMS generates data that identifies the who, the where, and the whys of poverty. Thus, it facilitates a more comprehensive analysis of development situation and design of appropriate policies and interventions. Since CBMS is designed to generate panel data, it provides valuable data for monitoring of program of target development outcomes over time. We have aptly demonstrated the feasibility of localizing the SDGs using CBMS through a collaboration with the local governance unit of the UNDP Hub for Asia and the Pacific in Bangkok. We pilot tested it in 2 local government units in the Philippines, and these local government units have used the report to respond to the specific needs of the different vulnerable groups and close the gaps. Next slide, please. So let me just provide you a brief background on CBMS. So the community-based monitoring system is a tool designed to provide policymakers with a good information base for tracking the micro-level impacts of various adjustment policies and policy shocks, particularly on the vulnerable groups in the society. So we developed and pilot tested CBMS in the Philippines in 1993, a long time ago, and has been piloted in more than 20 countries in collaboration with different governments, academic and research institutions, and non-government organizations and development partner agencies. Development and related capacity building activities on the implementation and applications of the CBMS methodology and tools are spearheaded by the CBMS Network Office based at De La Salle University in Manila, Philippines. So what are the key features of this CBMS? It involves a census of all households in the community using a structured set of tools and training modules. This means that indicators are available at the city, village, and even sub-village levels. It is local government unit based while promoting community participation. Next slide, please. It is local government unit based while promoting community participation. It taps existing LGU personnel or community members as monitors to make it very cost effective. It generates a core set of indicators that are being measured to capture the multidimensional aspects of poverty. Again, to make it accessible to all local government units, it uses freeware customized for CBMS data collection, processing, and poverty mapping. And it establishes database at each geopolitical level. Next slide, please. So this slide actually shows the 39 SDG indicators that generate this current CBMS questionnaire, but the questionnaire can actually be modified to be able to generate more SDG indicators. Next slide, please. In addition, a multidimensional poverty index can be generated that captures the deprivations in 9 dimensions simultaneously experienced by households. It is possible to see who are health poor, nutrition poor, housing poor, water poor, sanitation poor, education poor, income poor, job poor, and security poor at the same time, meaning that the households who are experiencing all of these dimensions of poverty can be determined. It's also possible to see the different combinations of deprivations being experienced by the households. Next slide, please. Just to show you some of the CBMS tools. So for data collection, we use an Android device, collect the data and also to do GPS reading. We also have a data processing module, what we call the CBMS StatSim Pro, that automatically generates the SDG indicators to make it easier for local government officials and staff to be able to come up with the indicators. There's also a poverty mapping module using QGIS to visualize the data and make it easier for program implementers and officials to make decisions regarding how to address the specific problems that have been identified through CBMS. Next slide, please. Next slide. To show you a sample CBMS output, it shows household level data. Each dot represents household, and we've used color coding. So red dots would indicate households with at least one child not attending school. So easier to see whether there are some patterns in terms of clustering of households in areas where there's no school or it's in a very remote area. So it's quite easy for the decision makers to understand the data and act accordingly. Next slide, please. Again, another sample CBMS output. Since it is designed to be done regularly, it can be used to show progress or lack of progress over time. So we can see here the indicator relating to children not attending school, and we've used a color coding scheme that where dark green represents very good performance and red represents poor performance. So we have seen that over a period of 3 years, all of the barangays or villages in this particular city have shown marked progress as indicated by the dark green shaded areas. Next slide, please. Adoption of the CBMS generates the necessary local level data and their desired disaggregation. So you can have household and individual level data, disaggregation by age, sex sublocation, income class, and other socioeconomic and demographic characteristics. You have data pertaining to vulnerable groups such as children, youth, women, elderly, persons with disabilities, and indigenous peoples, among others. And with this, you can generate local level SDG indicators. Next slide, please. So in terms of coverage, this has been implemented quite widely in the Philippines because we've started doing this as early as the first province to do it was in 1999. And recently, a law was passed and institutionalizing the community-based monitoring system in all cities and municipalities in the Philippines. And we've actually also able to pilot test it in other countries as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of uses of CBMS beyond SDG monitoring, this was originally designed to prepare local development profiles and plans, to design, target, and implement programs and interventions, also for policy analysis and impact assessment in the context of various thematic concerns, such as multidimensional poverty analysis, bottom-up planning and budgeting, gender and development, migration and development, disaster risk reduction and management, climate change impact, vulnerability assessment, monitoring child labor, localizing the MDGs and the SDGs, crisis response and mitigation, and impact monitoring. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide. So what are the key takeaways? A major challenge in achieving the SDGs is the lack of disaggregated data to ensure that no one is left behind. The community-based monitoring system, a local monitoring system that we developed as a tool for improving local governance, can provide the disaggregated data on the different dimensions of poverty as well as other SDG indicators. Therefore, CBMS can be used to localize the SDGs. With only 9 years left, it is imperative that we adopt available tools such as the CBMS in localizing the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you, Celia, for this very interesting presentation. It's, I think it's impressive how you can really go granular with this tool. I have some questions for the Q&A, and I see there are also many questions for you in the chat. Again, I invite the participant to post the question in the chat and not in the Q&A. Now let me turn to the last presentation, to the next country example from Nepal. We have Mr. Arjun Bhattarai. He's Deputy Secretary General of the NGO Federation of Nepal and SDG focal person. and he will tell us about the roles of the civil society for localizing the SDGs in Nepal. So please, Arjun, you have the floor.
Thank you, Stefano. Fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, and I'm very glad to share my experience with you this morning. And I'm going to share briefly about the civil society roles for localizing SDGs in Nepal. So I focus on mostly the qualitative information rather than quantitative, but some best experience which is applying civil society of Nepal. Next slide, please. As you know, like there's our Nepal is like, we have a new constitution, and already the constitution guided the 3 dimension of which is the relevant with the SDG, people's prosperity, planet, partnership and peace. It is like social transformation, economic growth, environment protection. So already we have a foundation of legal foundation to achieve the 2030 agenda. Next slide, please. So, but Nepal, adopted like 245 more new indicators. So it is a bit difficult issue for us now, because already so there is a, if you see in goal 1, there is a 14 more indicators, and goal 2 17 more indicators. So there are a lot of indicators developed by the government. So it's very hard to even analysis and even to find the database. So this is the big issue for now. So next slide, please. And altogether, the Nepal government adopted 245 new indicators. So altogether, we have 469 indicators, except 14s, because the 14s is our government not accepted because we didn't have a ocean. So this is the our government this SDG implementation plan. And we have the database only this 16 goals altogether. Next slide, please. So we have this institutional mechanism to implement monitoring progress. We have SDG focal agencies and national planning commissions, and there is a 4-layer high-level committee formed in the government to facilitate SDG implementation. A parliamentary committee to monitor, guide on SDG and governance, a SDG steering committee chaired by the Prime Minister, a SDG coordination committee chaired by the Vice Chair of the National Planning Commission, and 8 SDG thematic committee is headed by the NPC members. So this is the structure up to implement the SDG and localize the SDG. Next slide, please. And I share already this institutional mechanism, and there's the different thematic committee like economic development, social development, sustainable production and gender mainstreaming, and agriculture development and drinking water. There's a coordination unit, energy development and climate change, infrastructure development and governance. And this is the government mechanism, which is look all SDGs. Next slide, please. And we build up the civil society mechanism, and it's a very unique, especially in the Asia. We have Nepal SDG Forum, which is the collective platform of civil society, and it is founded in 25 September 2016, and founded by the 44 networks and organizations, and now with the more than 500 CSO directly working with this Nepal SDG Forum, and it is a collective civil society platform to engage CSO to enhance the capacity, develop effective planning, implementation, monitoring the ongoing activity, monitoring, reporting, lobby and advocacy on SDG and 2030 agenda. Next slide, please. And SDG Forum also, we have there's advisor committee, and the advisor committee included United Nations, bilateral, multilateral, INGO, Association of International NGOs, AIN, and other cooperative federation, and Federation of Nepalese Chamber of Industries, and they will regularly provide feedback and other advice to Nepal SDG Forum. And Secretariat is the NGO Federation of Nepal, which is the umbrella of 6,500 NGOs in Nepal. It means we have 7 provincial chapters, 7 district chapters, and 400 municipalities coverage across the countries. So it's a very larger platform. So which is the so it means it's easy to localize the SDG across the country. Next slide, please. So this is our actually how we, this is our mechanism to implement and localize the SDG. We first inform and empower by organizing different activity, and we involve and engage to the peoples and community, and we have a different actions, and also we do the research publication with the, like, you know, to share the innovation best practices and case study to the government and the other like multi-stakeholders. And for that, like, we need serious enabling environment for SDG implementation. So we work for also the agenda of civic space and other issues. So this is our framework to localizing SDGs, and which is the which is this mechanism developed by the Nepal SDG Forum. Thank you. Next slide, please. And we have like 11 strategy like to like, you know, localizing SDG. We regular engage with the stakeholders, and we map the stakeholders as well as, and we provide the opportunity to them to lead the different goals and thematic areas. So like youth, senior citizens, women's, private sector, cooperatives, and other sectors. Next slide, please. And this is the orientation and awareness staging at local, provincial, and national level. We do that activity. So we are doing regularly. Next slide, please. Just this strategy. So capacity building, local, provincial, national, regional level. We have like different capacity building activity. So we organize and we work with the community peoples. Next slide, please. And meeting, networking, and alliance building at all levels. So this is also our strategy to localize the SDG. Next slide, please. And lobby, advocacy, and policy dialogue is very important. So we work with the government of Nepal. We like engage with the policy makers and development partners and other different provincial governments and local governments. So we to ensure our agenda in, like, you know, different policy frameworks. Next slide, please. And we do the research and publications. We publish different reports and, like, you know, the civil society reports, Vienna reports, and other reports. And this report is the complementary and supplementary to the government report. So this is our regular job. Next slide, please. And localization in a municipality level. This is, you know, very urgent action now. We are working with the municipality level, because, you know, municipality, they don't still understand and they don't realize the SDG is their agenda. So the Nepal SDG Forum is regularly working with the local government now. Next slide, please. And campaign and mobilization. We have very unique campaigns, like we do together with like different stakeholders, government of Nepal and UN systems and other private sectors. So we have regular organizing the campaign. We have like SDG Action Week in the September, so every year. So we also we organize different campaign in a different like occasion, like HLPF during HLPF time, and other like international events, during international events. Next slide, please. And engagement on regional platform and international platform. So we share our best practices, case study, and we engage with also the international programs, and we organize the people assembly every year, and we share the best practices, community like, you know, issues in the regional level, local level, and national level. Next slide, please. And this is all like we compile our information like with this website nepalsdgforum.org. You can visit also, like, and you can understand how we engage in the Nepalese context. Next slide, please. And we engage BNR and post-BNR process. So this is our regular strategy to localize the SDGs. Next slide, please. Our aim to actually engage the BNR to build common understanding, awareness on the SDG while developing civil society perspective, analyze the mechanism, progress, trend, and gaps on the implementing of SDG, make recommendation, complement the government, review and promote the environment for areas of implementation 2030 agenda, promote and incorporate citizen-generated data in national planning and monitoring framework. We are doing this new project, citizen-generated data, how we incorporate, because still the government of Nepal not allowed to the citizen generated data in their national framework, but now we are engaging for that process, because 2022 is the government Nepal is doing CBS, so we are engaging with this our CBS process and this census process. Next slide, please. Yeah, some positive aspect of 2020 BNR, like in the 2020 BNR is Nepal is they have like lots of experience, and we engage a lot of, and government also review the progress with some database, because 2017 we didn't have a database. So with civil society and government, we work together in 2020 BNR, and better CSO engagement in process, and also the recognized CSO at HLPF to share their perspectives. So this is the very good opportunity for us. Next slide, please. And barrier, still we have a lot of barrier in our context, like poverty, hunger, unemployment, rising inequality, violence, injustice, disability, gender, regional, religion, caste-based discrimination, and untouchability, regional and racial discrimination, digital divide as our major issue to be addressed in upcoming days. Poor governance, weak institution capacity, chronic capitalism, rampant corruption, and misuse of public authorities, and priority less budgeting and implementation is existing at all levels. This is our issue to achieve the 2030 agenda. So this we are working on this issue. Next slide, please. So major gap and challenge, data and baseline gaps is of all indicators, because I already said that we have many indicators. So the data gaps is big issues. Many target and indicators are not relevant. Lack of awareness and capacity, lack of ownership at all levels. Still the local government, province government, they don't own the SDGs at their agenda. And the language barrier, because our English language is not a national language, so there's a language barrier still big issue. Lack of effective information, education and communication materials, budget and resource gap, lack of coordination and alignment of intergovernment agency, duplication, lack of prioritization, laws and policy still gaps, insufficient mechanism at the province and local levels. We have a national level mechanism, but still not develop the provincial and local level mechanism, and COVID-19 impact. Those are like the big issue and challenge and gap to implement the 2030 agenda in Nepal. Next slide, please. So there is there's a big financial gap. So it is still, due to this COVID impact, so it will be increased. So now we, government and Nepalese civil society, is jointly making a new strategy. So as government said that there's a big financial gap. So without fulfilling this financial gap, we cannot achieve the SDG in Nepal. So next slide, please. So this is the sharing of financing, like this public financing and private, cooperative and household. If you see the chart, like the 54.7% is the public, and then 36.6 for private, and 4.3 cooperative NGOs, and 4.4 household. This is the financing percentage sharing in our context. So this is my last slide, I think. So can you see the last slide, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arion. I think it was really interesting for me also, the fact that you are engaged in the voluntary national review process and how you managed to include the civil society. Now we have enough time for a good discussion. We have about 20 minutes, and I saw that I really thank all the participants. We have a lot of questions, both in the chat and in the Q&A. So now I invite Christian, my colleague Christian from DELOG, to present some of the questions to the speaker, and also indicate to which speaker the questions are directed. So Christian, if you can start sharing some questions, please.
Yes, thanks, Stefano. We have a lot of questions coming in, and I'd like to go back to Paolo with a question that came from Sani Ismail from ADB. And the question is, what is the potential solution when National Statistics Office has incomplete data at the local government level? Is there a way we can leverage on big data from online fintech companies to get additional information?
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. I think it's very relevant now. At UACD, we also, from a let's say, a statistical point of view, we face this challenge, and we work extensively also in the, let's say, to seize the opportunities when possible from big data and unconventional data sources. And this is, I think, so the idea of complementing the official information and statistics produced by statistical offices with, let's say, unconventional approaches is absolutely important. And especially now that with COVID, there's been an increasing need and demand of very timely and very granular statistics that cannot often be supplied with the traditional sources. At UCD, we have the working group that works on these topics, let's say, that works on the territorial statistics, and one of the pillars is exploring data innovation strategies. In our tool, in the tool that I presented, the web platform with the data on SDGs, we also have some of the indicators that we have modeled internally with the team through data approaches that are not directly produced by statistical offices, but are modeled by the team based on conventional sources that could be publicly available geospatial data. But now, I mean, we are continuing and exploring also big data from private sources. There are, let's say, partnerships that are initiating between big private data providers and international organizations, for example, to just to provide the public good of this big data. So use this enormous amount of information when possible under certain conditions to be able to produce more granular data, more timely data that otherwise wouldn't be available. So this is a direction where many countries are going, including national statistical offices.
Thank you very much, Paolo. And I have another question for Stefan. And this is a question from Chandan Barman from UNDP. The question is following. Data management is a big challenge and it should be taken seriously to achieve the SDGs. How SDMX can be integrated with government systems and can be used at the various government levels? Can it be used for single data management tool for all stakeholders? Over to you, Stefan.
This is a very good question. As I have tried to highlight in my presentation, SDMX is sponsored by 7 international organizations. These are basically all the major players in the field of statistics. SDMX was launched in 2000, and then it took some time to speed up the implementation of SDMX. At the beginning, there was a lack of user guides and also SDMX IT tools for implementation were not readily available. But in the meantime, it has developed SDMX by many international organizations. The community is getting bigger and bigger. So now SDMX is going to the version 3.0, and the tools are not only developed by the sponsor organizations, but also by other organizations that have already implemented SDMX for data exchange. So SDMX is really a tool for a data architecture, and it says also the IT tools are readily available. So we are trying to support SDMX in Asia Pacific with other developing partners, and we want to embark on SDMX like many other developed countries have already done. And this is why we are now working on an online training course that is not only targeted for national statistical offices, but all parties interested in sharing data in an efficient way with SDMX. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Yeah, excellent answer. And I like to direct the next question to Celia, and I will try to bundle 2 questions. So one of the questions is from Bishnu Puri, and is related to how community data are processed and concluded at local governments and above levels. And then the second question is from Gerald Query, Are these softwares installed in phones by community members, and how does the community learn how to use the tools to provide the data needed? So, Celia, to you.
Yeah, regarding the data collection application, we have that and they can download it in their phones or tablets. So there's a data collection module that's being used in the field. And the idea here is we want to empower the communities or the local government. So training is provided to them so that they can collect the data, they can process the data, and also analyze the data so they can formulate plans and programs based on the data that they have collected. So it's really a tool to empower the communities. It's a tool to improve local governance and achieve, I think, the goals that we want to achieve. But in addition, there are also the local development plans and budgets that they have to prepare annually to make sure that the budgets that they receive, and during the introduction that's been mentioned, about a quarter of the total budget actually goes to local government units. So we want to make sure that data is being used rationally. So I think I also want to highlight that in terms of processing system, what we've done is recognizing the limited capacity for some local government units. We've developed a processing system that can automatically generate the indicators, because we know how difficult it is for non-statisticians to identify what's the correct formula for unemployment rate or for school participation and so forth. And so we have developed a system that automatically generates these indicators, and also a very simplified way of mapping these indicators for visualization and better uptake of the information that has been generated by the local decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celia. There are more questions for you, so perhaps we have time to take them up later. I'd like to direct a question now to Ayun from Nepal.
Yeah.
And this is a question from Sri Rahma. For the Nepal experience, who do the measurement of the progress of SDG achievement, including doing the monitoring process? Is there a specific community movement regarding this monitoring progress of SDG achievement?
Yeah, thank you for the questions, very important questions. So we have like two mechanisms. One is the National Planning Commission is the lead agency, which is doing like this data management and the report preparations on behalf of Nepal government. And for civil society, I already explained, like Nepal SDG Forum is like the civil society mechanism. We compile the information from the civil society and we produce the report every year. So this is the two mechanisms, one the civil society and one the government mechanism. I answer your question.
Thank you very much, Ayun. Stefano, I have another question for Celia.
Yeah, I think we can do it. We have enough time, so Christian, you can ask the question. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So Celia, there's a question from Abel Tewold Meari. And the question is, your effort in establishing community-based monitoring systems and mobilizing global institutions to share your experience and implement them is appreciable. What kind of support you expect from international organizations in the future just to expand your effort and reach to other parts of the world?
Okay, thank you. Actually, Abel Tewalde is our CBMS researcher in Ethiopia. And I think what we would want to see is that if international organizations and other development partners can support the expansion of CBMS in the countries where we have pilot tested it, or introduce it in countries where it has not been pilot tested, and also to provide capacity building to be able to use the information towards achieving the SDGs. So even in the Philippines, while the data has been collected, CBMS has been implemented in many LGUs, there's still a need for capacity building activities for them to generate SDG reports and incorporate the information that has been collected in their local plans and budgets. So I think this is where we would need the cooperation, partnership with other international organizations to scale up the implementation and adoption of CBMS. Thank you.
Thanks, Celia. And I would hand it over to you, Stefano.
Yes, thank you, Christian, for your help in this Q&A. Maybe I will do a final round. I have a question that I would like to ask to all the 4 speakers. It's the same question, and I think it's quite important, and it emerged during the discussion. So my question for all of you is, we know that is on the governance of data and statistics, because we had a presentation from international organization, regional organization, to specific presentation by country-specific presentation with concrete example on local data. And we know that very often one of the challenges, in addition to data availability, is the governance of data, the governance of statistics, because very often there is a lack of coordination between the different levels of government in terms of statistics, and also between different institutions and different ministries. So my question for all of you would be, what in your view, how can we strengthen the governance of statistics, the multi-level governance of statistics, and what can your institution do to address this gap? So maybe we can restart from Paolo.
Thank you, Stefano. I think this is quite a challenging question. I think that the data ecosystem is becoming more and more complex. Therefore, even the governance of statistics, as you call it, actually is facing increasing challenges to achieve a good coordination across government level, if we include in the data ecosystem that now we are using also the non-official sources, and all the different sources, methods that are now available, and which represent an important part that we cannot now forget about. I think that the governance will have to be enriched with systems to structure, I think, the complexity of this ecosystem, to provide guidelines, to provide standards, setting standards that are comparable, that are clear for data, that each type of agent, being a government, being another type of organization, a national, subnational government, can align in a way, at least to ensure that, let's say, the interoperability of data and to ensure, let's say, comparability and efficiency in the data processing. Maybe I covered more let's say the data, less the institutional part, but more the more concrete data challenges. But I think this is something to highlight. Thanks.
Thank you, Paolo. I think it's a good point, and we also had many projects together in Tunisia or in Morocco on this, the governance of statistics. I will ask the same question to Stefan. What is your view? What is the DB view on the governance of statistics?
I would like to recall that SDGs are a joint responsibility. We are working closely with the national statistical offices in the region to integrate decentralized data processes. On the one hand, the public statistical systems will remain key. On the other hand, for more granular data at the subnational level, these can be gathered through community-based approaches. I have tried to line out 2 innovative technologies that we are supporting to integrate data within the region, in the countries at the national, subnational level for different disaggregations, not only for geographical disaggregations that are not that are specific for the countries. I have highlighted SDMX as a tool to structure the data and exchange the data in an efficient way, and an application programming interface. So once you have the data in a structured format that can be exchanged within the country, with other international organizations, this is a machine-to-machine way to enable the sharing of the data. So these are ways we are promoting the integration of decentralized processes at the national level. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan. And Celia, what is your perspective on the multi-level governance of statistics? You work very much on community-based monitoring system. Are these integrated into the national framework? And you can tell us a bit more in the case of the Philippines, how is your perspective on this multi-level governance of statistics? Celia?
Okay, I'd like to share that actually in the case of the Philippines, the local government units adopted CBMS outside the official statistical system initially. It was really demand-driven because they realized that the official statistical system could not provide them the data that they needed for local governance. And so they were using their own resources to pay for the data collection, the processing, and so forth, using their own personnel to process and analyze the data. It took 20 years in the case of the Philippines to institutionalize CBMS. And I think what helped was that CBMS, while it was lodged at the local government unit, used official concepts and definitions. So while it was mainly based at the local government units and driven by local government units and the communities, we still used official concepts and definitions being used by the National Statistics Office. So that made it easier to integrate or to complement the data coming from national statistical offices. And I think the other thing is that I think at this time, national NSOs are more open to non-traditional sources of data, which was not the case when we started CBMS, which was in the early 1990s. So then it was just the data being collected by NSOs. But I think there's greater recognition now that not all of the data can be generated, can be produced by NSOs. And so non-traditional sources have also to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Very comprehensive response. Arjun, what is your perspective on the governance of data statistics? You mentioned in particular to the view of the civil society. You mentioned that civil society is engaged in the VNR and post-VNR processes. So we know that there are also movements to do voluntary local reviews. How do you see this governance of statistics in Nepal?
Yeah, of course, like there should be very important urgent action to digitalize the SDG indicators, because still, there is no interlink with the local government, provincial government, and national governments, and also that within the other ministerial level. So I think there is important issue to capacitate to the Census Bureau Statistics, CBS, and the National Planning Commission, and as well as the local government, because we don't have still that kinds of mechanism to collect the data and to digitalize the data. So one is very important to establish the IT-based technology at all level of government, and the second is the capacity to who handle the data, and the third is there's a lot of activities going on in the civil society level, but there's still the government not recognize the civil society data. So what we're doing now is like we are doing the how we incorporate citizen generated data in a national process. So we are also we are working with other government institutions. So I think there need to be a invest to develop the systems in the all tier of government. So this is very important. So still our government is lag behind to establish the mechanism. So this is my idea to achieve the 2030 agenda.
Thank you, Arjun. There is a final question by Christian, so we'll give him the floor very briefly, and then we can go towards the conclusion of this webinar. Christian?
Yeah, thanks, Stefano. There are still some open questions, and I also like to kindly invite the panelists to choose whether they can also react directly on some of the questions. There's a question from Sri Rahmat, and I think, Stefan, you might be the best person to react on that question. Sri is asking, I'm wondering whether there will be future collaboration tightly among Asia Pacific countries, particularly among national statistic institutes and organizations. Would like to know whether out of national statistics organization in each country, there will be other public sources providing main data. Thank you.
If I understand the question correctly, if there's collaboration, we are working together with other developing partners like the United Nations Statistical Commission and the UNESCAP, but we are also partnering with UN Statistical Institute of Asia and the Pacific on the activities I have tried to outline, like SDMX and APIs. So we are working as ADB together with partners that are promoting these tools in the region. But for the second part of the question, we are working closely with national statistical offices, but in the countries we have the national statistical systems where the different data providers, like for example, the Ministry of Finance is often producing the government finance data, and the central bank is responsible for the monetary aggregates. So depending on the country, different institutions are responsible for the different indicators. So we are mainly focusing on the national statistical offices, but we are working with all the partners in the national statistical system, depending on the context in the country. And we are now working on an online training course. We are promoting online training courses, like, for example, what we have done for CAPI. It's already in the third iteration. Countries are keen on implementing CAPI, especially now during the COVID pandemic, where it's very difficult to visit households in person. So CAPI, CAVI, interviewing, this is key, especially now, and the technologies are there. And the same is for SDMX. So we are working on online training courses, and these are open to everyone. So everyone interested, researchers, students, and all interested can join. So this is open to everyone. I hope this answers the question.
I think it does, Stefan. There are still many questions, but unfortunately we are running out of time now. We only have 1 minute left. What we can do is perhaps to send some of these questions to the speaker that can get back to the participant after the webinar. Just in 1 minute, without I will try to summarize which are, in my opinion, the key takeaway messages. The three key takeaway messages that I see. The first one is that we need a comparable and homogeneous indicator framework to promote policy dialogue among peers and to compare cities, regions in different countries. But we also need to integrate context-specific data, and the community-based monitoring system that was presented can really provide additional context-specific data. We need new technology, new innovation in data collection and dissemination for SDG monitoring. And finally, engaging the civil society in the SDG monitoring and in the VNR process is really key to ensure transparency and accountability towards the achievement of the SDGs. So I would really like to thank all the speakers and also the participants for being so active in the Q&A. I think I really learned a lot in this session. This is not the end of the week. We are going to continue, and I invite all of you to participate in the panel tomorrow on multi-stakeholder engagement, partnership, and knowledge. It's really a key topic because, again, we need to achieve the SDGs. We need all on board. So now I will conclude here the session, thanking you again very much for the participation, for your active contribution to the webinar. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow for the next session. Goodbye.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, everyone. It's really nice, very good panel today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hi, Tony. We can close in 1 minute.
Copy.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.